Second Playable City session of the day, which we're doing in partnership with British Council, focuses on the international conversations that we've been building around Playable City. Right from the outset, the very first thing we did was a Playable City sprint, a small workshop with artists from Southeast Asia and the UK thinking about play in the city, bringing together artists, creatives and technologists to think about new ideas, their own practice and their relationship to the city. We always say here that the best way to do something new is to work with people who aren't like you. And while cities around the world share many characteristics, many of the challenges are shared, many of the opportunities are the same. The great thing about working with people from across the world is they impart their flavor, their culture, their way of approaching the geography and their understanding of what public space is to the conversation. The global response, as I said, to Playable City has been completely overwhelming, and at the moment we're building the Playable City International Network and stringing together partners who can make their own work, who can share it with us, who can challenge and hack what our notion of a Playable City is, and hopefully to bring all of that work back to Bristol to showcase what other people think of this thing that we thought was a small little project that we started here. So, our first speaker of this session is another Playable City judge, Richard Roberts of Jason Bruges Studio. And as you'll see, Jason Bruges have been making huge pieces of amazing work in public spaces which use creative technology for many years. So he's going to share with us some of their exciting and innovative stuff. Richard, thank you.
Hello, everyone. So yes, I'm from Jason Bruges Studio. We're a London-based design practice. It's about 17 of us, and we make, it's really hard to describe what we do, but in a sentence, we make electronic architectural artworks that are site-specific, time-based, and encourage interaction. We're really lucky in when we get to work all over the world. And one of the key things about the work that we do is we do an awful lot of design through making. So we have a workshop as part of our studio, and we find that it helps to make stuff in order to be able to design things, particularly things that people want to interact with or engage with. So this was a production of a piece we did for More 4, which you might recognise in some of these idents you might have seen on the TV recently. We built hundreds of these things with a bunch of students. It was good fun. Okay, so what do? So our work's really diverse. It ranges from what we would call kind of art pieces, so pieces of public art in public spaces, such as the digital fountain piece you see over there. We do architectural pieces, like we did the facade of the W Hotel, which is Showtime, which is there. We do pieces for brands, like, for example, for Aston Martin, we've done some installations for them, which are all about revealing the car in a special way. And we do bits which are, or artworks which are really about kind of interaction and engaging people. And really that's a kind of a common narrative or a common thread that falls or runs through the work that we do. So this is a really early piece we did for WWF. They came to us with 100 of their old collection boxes, and they said, "Well, can you do something with these?" And we were like, "Well, yeah, we think we could probably make them, make people feel like they might want to kind of give some money to the World Wildlife Fund." So that's one of our pieces. Okay, so I'm going to rattle through quite a few projects quite quickly. This was a piece of art, an artwork we did for Great Ormond Street Hospital, Children's Hospital, and we were approached by the hospital. They were building a new extension, and they had this corridor between the ward and the kind of the pre-theatre area, and they wanted to be able to distract children as they went on their way to theatre, basically. So we created this kind of woodland theme within a hospital, which is pretty hard to do. And within this kind of this woodland environment, animals come to life, and as children or as people pass through the corridors on their way towards theatre. We've developed this wallpaper, this bespoke wallpaper that represented this kind of woodland environment, and behind it we developed these kind of these bespoke LED displays that could display animals that came to life as the children walked past. So this is a piece in Sunderland Station in the northeast, and this was an example where we were asked to help kind of reinvent a public space, if you like. So the station was being redeveloped, and they had this 180-metre long canvas opposite the main station platform, which was a disused platform. So it was a space that was previously a platform and no longer was. The architects came to us and said, well, we've got this kind of canvas of glass blocks. We've already specified them because of the fire requirements of the space. What can you do with glass blocks? And we thought, well, the thing about stations and those kind of public spaces, those transport interchanges, is really the most amazing thing is just the flow of people through them. So could we in some way try and represent or capture the flows of people or the movements of people through this space? So working at one-to-one, we built some mock-ups and started to think about these glass blocks as low-resolution displays. How can you kind of get an image of a person or the sense of a person through something which is really, really low resolution? We put a call out for local people to participate, and we asked a bunch of people to do what you would do on a station while we film you. To generate content for this piece. We then developed, this was quite an old piece, about 7 years old, so we then developed a generative piece of software that would take these kind of filmed characters and manipulate them and move them up and down the platform. So if you watch where the mouse clicks, then the people kind of gravitate towards that point. Bit like what happens when a train pulls in and the doors are kind of in a particular location, which is what we were aiming for. So here's the piece. What happens is you basically get these ghostly characters inhabiting a previously disused platform on the opposite side of the platform that you use. And they're just there. They're just there as a kind of a presence, even when the space is completely empty. And they kind of move up and down. They do kind of different things that people do on station platforms. But at either end of the platform, we have a train sensor. So when a train pulls into the station, they all rush to get on the train, or they miss the train, or they kind of walk off, or they get on and off. They do the kind of things that people do on a platform, and it just adds. Although the piece isn't directly interactive, we find that it adds this sense of occupation, of kind of ambience, of interest into the space. Okay, this next one is a piece we've recently completed in downtown Toronto, in Canada. It's a piece called Back to Front. It was inspired by an analysis of the site. It's a small park in downtown Toronto, and it's quite rare in downtown Toronto where you get a patch of land which is big enough to actually get direct sunlight because of the height of the buildings. So we realised that the shadows that were cast across this site were actually really interesting, and the way that pedestrians cast shadows and the trees cast shadows and the buildings cast shadows all together kind of added to the richness of this particular site. The other thing about Toronto, of course, is it's quite northerly, so you get kind of long shadows cast from the sun. So we kind of created this series of granite monoliths that could capture and reveal shadows in interesting ways, both of people, but also of the buildings and of the trees and the various other things that kind of move around the space. And we developed bespoke sensing and light emitting modules that could both detect the ambient light and also create light, and they did that by cycling through this process at 100 hertz. So basically, one moment it's sensing, the next moment it's actually basically emitting light, and then it's sensing and emitting light. And because the units were able to do this in real time, pieces became really, really engaging and playful. So So people just want to kind of play with them. They want to see what their shadows do. You know, how they can manipulate these objects, play from one side to the other. And so here we are. So at night, you get this shadow play between one side of the piece and the other side of the piece where people are passing. And during the day, you can capture the shadows cast onto the pieces from the sunlight. That's Vincent, who's one of our coders, pretending to be a model. Okay, so this next project's in Beijing. We were approached by a UK architect, and their clients had a really big wall, huge wall, in a conference centre that they wanted to make a centrepiece. They wanted it to be really big and bold and colourful. They didn't specifically say they wanted it to be interactive, but they didn't want it to be a video wall. So we'd previously done some experiments with dichroic films and dichroic filters. These are really interesting things. So basically, it's a special coating that you can apply to either plastic or glass, and if you shine a bright light through it, it diffracts the light into different colours. And we realised it could create kind of quite beautiful things. So we developed these series of crystals that could sit on the wall, and some bespoke light units that would focus really tight beams of light onto these crystals to create really dramatic patterns. So really, the brief was to create something bright, bold, beautiful, and exciting using kind of the minimal technology and the minimal means. But we thought, well, okay, that's all very nice, but and we can vary these lights at will. But what do we actually want to do with it? And so the colour palette started to lead us down the route of, well, this could start to become something that blossoms, maybe like a tree, for example. So could we create a digitally blossoming tree? Could it grow from a location of the observers that are moving around in front of it? So here we have somebody moving in front of a wall, and what we created was this algorithm that would generate this digital tree in response to the movements of the people in front of the piece. So it was always changing, always kind of reconfiguring itself. And it changes whether there's one person or there's multiple people, always adapting and always changing. What about the city scale? So we were asked last year by the Shard to develop something for their New Year's Eve celebrations. So at very short notice. So we were basically asked at about this time last year to do something that covered 40 stories at the top of the Shard, which was fun. And so we wanted to do a digital countdown. I mean, it's a pretty obvious thing to do for New Year's Eve, but what's kind of nice about this is that it's turning an icon in the city into a kind of a collective beacon for a collective moment, which only happens once a year. So the some digital fireworks. So the numbers that you see, the kind of the individual pixels, just to give you a sense of scale, each one of those is an entire apartment window. And there were lots of kind of fun challenges with this project, like, for example, filling 30 stories at the top of a Shard with smoke, and then convincing people via the London Fire Brigade the building wasn't on fire. Trying to test it. How do you try and test this thing without giving away what you're doing on the tallest building in London that everyone can see all the time? So yeah, lots of fun with that. It's just a bit about our process. So we visualized this in a piece of software called Cinema 4D, which enabled us to directly drive the animations and the lights on the building itself. So we started to develop this process where we can design in the computer and then directly relay that into our artworks. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome Olamide Udoma, who's a researcher, writer and filmmaker who's lived in South Africa, London and Nigeria. Ola, as she is also known, is the founder of Future Lagos. And we're really excited that we're going to be working with our partners, British Council and Future Lagos, on Playable City Lagos, an 8-day lab which will happen in Lagos in March next year. And we're going to launch an open call for participants next week. So Ola's going to talk a little bit about the context of Lagos, about Future Lagos, and perhaps a little bit about what we're hoping to do when we're there. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. And thank you everyone else for being here. And thank you, Bristol, because it's actually been a really great experience being here. It's really inspiring as well, because it's such a creative city, which is not exactly what Lagos is, even though it's creative, but there are also shortcomings. Okay, great. You can see that. So I just want to start by talking a little bit about Future Lagos. So Future Lagos is an organization that bridges the gap between young people and the state. So what we're trying to do is get young people more involved in what's going on in the city through various different means. So through kind of dialogue, through online social media, connecting through cinema, connecting through also talks and, all the workshops and those kind of things as well. So as Claire said, I have lived in various different countries, but my home now is Lagos. I have been drawn to Lagos because it's a city that continues to inspire me. It continues to just celebrate itself. So we have this strong identity, even though we're probably very multicultural. We're also various ethnicities. There are a lot of people from neighboring countries and neighboring cities that live in Lagos. We're still one. We're very much Lagosian. So the reason I decided to introduce Future Lagos to Lagos is because there wasn't really a voice for young people, especially on urban issues. Not just young people, but general everybody. No one really thinks about their neighbor, and no one really thinks about the city itself and how it's developing. Everyone goes around their day doing their own thing. And that's not their fault. It is actually the fault of our history and our culture. Also, there are a lot of projects happening by individuals and creatives and architects and urban planners, but they're not talking to each other. So what we decided to do, what Future Lagos is trying to do, is kind of bridge that gap and try and get them talking to each other so that the impact can actually be felt by the whole city. So the next question is, does Lagos even play? I mean, it's a huge question because, as I was explaining to a lady earlier on, Lagos is a harsh environment, and we're dealing with over 20 million people in not a large space. I mean, someone told me that 15 people, if we all stood still in Lagos, 15 people will fit into 1 square meter. So that's just tremendous. I mean, I don't know if we could do a demonstration, but and to see that we can't fit into 1 square meter. So we're obviously very stressed. We're trying to move around the city. We're working. We're trying to, raise our families. And there's a lot of traffic. We don't have enough infrastructure. We're shouting at each other. We're angry with each other. So how do Lagosians play? Can they play? And so I started to think about this and break this down. And the way Lagosians play, I mean, I don't know if you know that Lagos is, I think it's the highest consumer of champagne. So, well, yeah. And I think we bought the most champagne. I don't know if you know about ShopRite. ShopRite is a store that started in South Africa, but they now have a store in Lagos. And we actually bought, and around the world, and we bought the most champagne in the whole of Africa last year. So more than actually where the store actually started. So how Lagos plays. So basically we play by pretty much not getting drunk. That's not what I'm trying to say. But what I'm trying to say is that we play by going out, having fun, music, shouting, getting really excited, going completely berserk, and then going back to your everyday and trying to get to work. And so we also describe ourselves as a city that plays from Thursday to Monday. So you find people on Sunday night, you should be going home to get ready for work the next day because you're waking up at 5 a.m. to get to work for 9. But however, you find us at a beach, going out and partying and, just having a great time. So that's how Lagos plays. But then there are also like small interactions that happen. So I was driving down a road to a friend's house, and you just find like a group of people outside their house just sitting around having a community meeting and drinking, and they've taken over the street. So you're trying to maneuver your car around them, and you're like really angry, but then you're actually thinking, hold on a sec, this is actually a great intervention that someone's just decided to do because their house is too small and they can just get on the street and have a nice little chit chat. So so then I thought about other interventions that creatives are doing as well, and this is the block party. It happens, I don't know, once or twice, 3 times a year. And what a group of creators have just decided to do is just take over a street within the community and just pretty much play on the street, have a DJ party, music, art, you have graffiti artists. And recently they had one in Lagos Island, which is the old Lagos, the old cities where Lagos actually started. And it's quite a rundown area. It's got derelict buildings from the colonial times, from the Portuguese ancestry. And what these group of guys, or girls as well, started to do was just take over the space. And you had these people coming out of church with their headgear and traditional gear and just getting involved as well and interacting with each other. So I think that's the idea of it. It's not just about, creatives getting together, but also coming together from all parts of life and walks of life. So also there's, I don't know if you know about World Parking Day. So it's a day where you celebrate parks and not cars, hence park and then ing. So what we did this year, Future Lagos and a couple of groups of other organizations took over a car parking space, and created a park space. So that we had Monopoly games and different board games, as well as a food truck, just to like get people kind of excited about and start talking about what's going on in the city and the use of cars within the city. Another thing that happened recently was a run for a cure. It was actually for cancer. And these runs go on all the time, all over the world. But what I liked about this was they had little stops where people can stop off and do various activities as a group together. So it started to get people involved. And even though it was raining the whole day, people actually came out and got wet and just enjoyed the day. So then in terms of Playable City Lagos, we've answered the question, okay, Lagosians play, we're great at playing, we love it. But then we're also very stressed, we're also very anxious, we also don't know what's going on in our city. So then what would Playable City Lagos bring? So, so far what we've done is Hillary from Playable City, Watershed came along, someone from the British Council, Lindsay also came along, and we had various different workshops. And we decided the next thing to do was do some research to see exactly what we're talking about. How do Lagosians play? What do they want to talk about? Where will they engage? How will they engage? So we did a little questionnaire. And I mean, anyone can go online and do it, but you don't live in Lagos, so sorry, no need for you to do it. But yeah, so we asked questions about their Lagos. What do they do? Where do they live? How do they live? How do they move around? About public space. And it was very interesting actually about public space, because the idea of public space here is, anywhere on the streets where you can engage, anywhere on the streets and parks and where you can rest and relax and interact. But public space in Nigeria, a lot of people said, oh yeah, public space, what do we do? Okay, we go to like equivalent of like McDonald's or a nightclub, which is not necessarily what I would technically define as public space. But then who am I to define what public space is? This is what they define as public space. Also, mobility, how easy do you move around the city? We asked them about employability, waste management, and also, the last question was, if you were governor for the day, what would you do? And they answered some really great answers as well. So I'm actually going to play a video a little bit after, like, next slide, which was part of the research. So we went out, later, Jimmy. We went out with 4 researchers and just kind of went out and just asked them a couple of questions about how they feel about the city. So I'll just play a little video.
Is a state of opportunity.
Yeah, one of the biggest attractions to people that come.
Sorry, let me try and make it full screen. Yeah.
Sorry, it's so Japanese.
To live in Lagos
brilliant.
is
Thank you.
opportunity. Lots of people want to travel abroad to places like America, places like the United States, England, and the rest of them like that. But the major reason why they just want to go there is not because that place is so superb like that. They have their own challenges too, but it's just because of the opportunity. There are better opportunities in Lagos than any other state in Nigeria. You get?
Well, Lagos State is closest to the coast, closest to the Atlantic, and let's say this is where the Europeans first landed. So development began from Lagos State. So it's like the most developed state of all the states in Nigeria. So automatically, people troop into Lagos State to get their own share of this development.
People have this mentality that Lagos is where the money is. So that's where they got it strong. You understand? I don't think there's any attraction that is. It's just the money that people think, Lagos, I can make my money in Lagos. Lagos.
You and I have heard it severally. People believe there is money in Lagos. And being a commercial state, everybody wants to be in Lagos. And because, just a little, supply than demand.
Yeah, so then we also put out some kind of posters and ideas to people just to kind of get their imagination going. So we put out this idea of hovering keke. So keke marawas are like little tuk-tuks. I think most of people know what tuk-tuks are, like tricycle type covered public transport. And so we kind of put this idea of, okay, look, we now have so much traffic. Let's create hovering keke marawa, or robot trash cans that can just go around the city and you just throw in some rubbish and it measures how much rubbish you have thrown in, and then it gives you a reward, maybe some credit for your phone or some internet data or just something like that can be gotten easily. And also it will use the rubbish to actually generate its own power. And then auto-driving cars. So another issue is that people are moving really fast throughout the city. They're always trying to get somewhere. But however, they're in traffic for 2 hours, 3 hours. So why not have a car that can drive itself and then you can do your work or talk to your people or have a meeting even. So out of all that, we also did a workshop, and what we decided to look at is mobility. So we've started talking about creating spaces that, I know I've got to finish, sorry. I started talking about creating spaces that actually draw people together that become bus stops in themselves. So you don't have to create infrastructure, but you can actually just create interventions, and then that will draw people together and the buses will actually stop at those stops. So that's it from me, and thank you very much.
It's really exciting to have two Playable City partners here, one at such an early stage and just kind of at the beginning of the things that we could do together, and Seiichi Saito, who we've been working with for a lot longer, and we have some ready-to-go Playable City Tokyo ideas. It's also been really amazing to watch Hello Lamppost in the last 6 months, which was our first award winner, kind of travel the world around Singapore. We also took it to Tokyo, it's been to Austin, and to kind of, I guess, gather the data of how people talk about their cities and juxtapose some of the ways they feel about their cities from across the world. So do chat to Ben in the breaks about some of the things that they've learned. But our final speaker in this session is Seiichi Saito of amazing Japanese studio Rhizomatiks. We first met at a British Council digital conference, I think 5 years ago, and their work kind of blew us away. And so I've been really happy that over the last year we've worked really closely together, delivering Playable City Tokyo, engaging people in workshops, thinking about what the Japanese version of all these things are, and he's going to share them with you. Seiichi.
First of all, thanks for having me. Thanks for Clare, British Council to be here. To be here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Rhizomatiks, which we founded 2006. So it's been like almost 10 years. And then we are the studio like the Watershed. It's just amazing, like the environment there. But we have a really great studio in Tokyo too. So we are the mixture of like device people, programmers, designers. I used to study architecture. So they're a mixture of the talent. And then we do a lot of like art and installation, commercial and things like that. And then we do a lot of researches. And then some of the keyword we are actually always deferring is one is hack. So whatever we have existing technology, existing cities or whatever, we try to have a question like why it's like this, or why it doesn't really improve. And then also the craft, we really respect. So, the people who is getting dirt all the time, like, screwing and like tapings and things like that. So we are the people who actually create the things. And then this is a kind of ecosystem like, well, I was the artist, like 100% artist, but I lost a lot of monies for the art because I invest myself to do that. And then I found out like, why artists cannot really live in Tokyo, like, being just an artist. I mean, usually like the artists have a second job or, side job to earn the money. So we start calling ourselves like, we use the same name as an artist and then also as a creative. So we do a lot of commercial work. And then also whatever we create, it have to be like DD entertainment. So we stick with like whatever we create. I mean, it have to be like entertain people, like cool, joy, fun, dancing, whatever. And then also we have really great connection with researchers, academic. So we've been working with a lot of professors and university. I'm still teaching at the 2 universities. And then also we start realizing that like all the research project, like, whatever done in the university is kind of boring. The way they wear, the way they talk, and like all the bunch of text in the PowerPoint, it's just so boring. So we start collaborating with a researcher, like how we can actually make it like the better, things like for example, art installation. So for example, like my eyewear, which has a 6-axis sensors and also the eyeball movement tracking system. Well, this is also like a collaboration with more than 10 researchers, and then we put it off and we put it in the market like 2 weeks ago. And then, eventually Rhizomatiks is a team of maybe 40 people full time. So we have a 4 different department, but, we're the same people. So sometimes I belong to research and sometimes I belong to the architecture. So I'm just going to quickly introduce the research things. Well, this is we do a bunch of like visualizations. This is a collaboration with Ryuichi Sakamoto, visualizing magnetic field. We've been working with a Japanese idol called Perfume, doing like holographic screens, and this is actually the live. Drones, everyone loves drones. We have 24 drones tracking human motion, the drone dancing with the human art performance. And then also like tracking the human figure, scanning at the same time. Robots dancing with the humans and overlaying the 3D environment with the live cameras. And robot again. Yeah, the bunch of robots dancing with human being. And then we've been working with Ninja Tune a lot, the record label in UK, doing the music videos. This is like one of the experimental things of sports and visualizing and fencing. So we do a lot of things. I mean, I can talk about this for 2 hours, but I'm not going to do that. So I think I'm going to focus on the architecture department this time. Well, because it's really related to the Playable City. So my idea is that like how we can actually install some of the technology inside the cities. And then, I was the media art director for the one-night events called a Roppongi at Night, where Clare came over, Haloran Post actually did the installation. 780,000 people came over at night, officially. So, but it's still like 300,000 people came over. So it's like the city was really packed. And it was really interesting moment that we are the city which going to have Olympic 2020. So I think this was a really good exercise and massage to the city. And then I'm going to show you like some of the work we've done. This is like right before you guys had Olympic 2012. And then this was a work with Nike. And then they had the device called Fuel Band. I don't know if you remember. It can track the human motion. So we invite 3,000 kids and give them the Fuel Band. dancing inside, DJs and visualization and etc. But we track each one of the guys' motion. So, for example, like boy versus girls, like who dance the most, in the crowd. So we are real time visualizing, and we are projection mapping to the Battersea. It was really fun. And then people like not really dancing, like try to get more scores, so they're like the weird dancing. It was really interesting. So this was one, and then this is another project we've done. So this is the idea of like, what if we can hack the city with a mobile phone? So we control fontaines and lights and things like that. And then eventually the Santa Claus DJ came over and started dancing. But what people start talking about, this is done by Rhizomatiks, but there's so many CGIs. So we knew that people were going to talk about. So we had the second version. So it's all Leo. Yeah, we love Japanese Idol. A lot of props from a previous TV commercial was actually installed in real time, and then the people can actually tweak around, including changing the color of the Tokyo Tower. And then next one, which is the last project. This is a TV commercial, but it's actually the app is Leo, so it's synchronized with others, and also the TV commercial and also the radio stations. So we've been doing a lot of like the experimental stuff through the cities, but this is actually the current situation of Tokyo. It's toward 2020, so there are so many construction going on, and then also my impression of Tokyo is that there are so many not allowed. So you can really run with the dog in the park, or you can really, bounce a ball in the park. So I think that was the social problem. And I saw like we have to have a protocol between the people who are actually living in the city, and then also working in the city, and with the relationship with the cities. So that's why we're really interested in like having a Playable City Tokyo, and it was really successful. I mean, I can't really wait to share like what we thought. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all very much. I guess the first thing I wanted to pick up was that sense of permission in the city, because I think that's one of the most interesting things about going to different cities in the world. And you have these stereotypes of what you think you can do and what you think you can't do. And there's all the rhetoric we have here about one of the great things about Bristol is permission to do things and enabling things. But actually, one of the things I found about working in Tokyo is because Mori, who one of the large landowners, are the partners, permission is very easy. In fact, in some of the areas we're working. What's been your kind of experiences of getting stuff off the ground, and how you've had to negotiate kind of permission or not permission?
I guess it depends where you're working. Fortunately for us, we're typically approached by somebody who wants to do something already. So we're in a situation where we just kind of have to convince them maybe they want to do it in a slightly different way than what they originally intended. What's interesting is that often when you kind of have a permission in place to create an artwork that might work in a certain way or engage people in a certain way, that's what you plan and that's what you assume for. But actually, when it goes live, people treat it in a completely different way from what you're expecting. And that can be interesting from a kind of permissions point of view. So we've done some stuff at the Tate where which enable people to kind of to draw and write their own stuff and it to go live. And then you've got all sorts of problems with, it's whether you see it as a problem or not, but with kind of censorship and kind of, oh my goodness, how can we deal with this kind of content, all that kind of stuff. So it's an ongoing, challenging and interesting thing, I think, as part of creating one of these projects, is permissions and anticipating what people are going to do.
Well, for me, the Japanese situation is slightly different from maybe what, especially from Bristol, because there's so many what we say is stonehead politicians and government. So, well, personally, I don't really trust the government. So, well, for me, but the thing is, they are the followers. So they follow the things. Like we do things really successfully. They start talking about, see, that's what I'm talking about. So that's actually the case study what we have to do. And right now, there's so many discussion about we have to change the law and also the policies and things like that toward 2020, because there's so many banned things. So it's really vigorous right now to discuss about the permissions.
I don't know, what's Lagos feeling like?
Yes, actually, it's very similar to what Seiichi is saying. And I think the way artists and creatives are going around permission is there's more kind of guerrilla architecture and guerrilla spaces that just come out or pop out in the middle of the night that you haven't seen or that you just kind of bump into, and then it's gone like 2 days later. So then you don't really have to get permission. And because getting permission can be very bureaucratic, can be very kind of tough to kind of get to know who you even need to speak to, let alone get to the person you need to speak to. So you kind of find that a lot going on. But I mean, we've just got a new government, a new governor in, and he seems to be a little bit more approachable. Like they are really putting themselves out there to hear ideas. So I think it should start changing in terms of, but it's still great to have all these kind of guerrilla type things going on. So yeah.
One of the things that I think is great about having Jason Bruges and Rhizomatiks Studios together is that you guys are kind of the the front runners of doing this kind of work, and you've been doing it a lot longer than other people, which means you've also got to the point where thinking about legacy technology and, you know, thinking about what happens to these projects over time in public spaces is probably something that you're the few in the world who can talk about this stuff. So I guess, I mean, what has happened to your projects? I know the roundabout in Hoxton is one that you guys...
Yeah, they break. That's what happens. No, not all of them.
Do you get paid for knowing that they're going to break and that you're going to keep going and looking
We've
at
got
them?
much better at it. So, yes, of course. You when you're designing these things, you've got they use computers, they use technology, they use stuff that kind of that will die. You know, there aren't many computers that have been around for 30 years and are still working perfectly. So yes, you do have to try and mitigate that through design, but you also have to accept that that they will evolve to a certain degree, that it's not an artwork or a piece that's ever completely finished, and it's going to require maintenance and change. And what'll happen is that you can't just come along 10 years later and just put the same components in, because you can't buy those components anymore. So then you have to think about something else. How can the artwork evolve? How can it change? What can it become? And the same is also with how people respond to the pieces over time as well, and allowing a flexibility in terms of how you program them or how you develop them to allow you to adjust them and adapt them as people interact with them in a different way.
Well, we have a really great example about how the new media kind of types of installation is dying. For example, like the one with the big A numbers in part of a Mori building, which is Roppongi, the piece is called Counterboy, and it's like massive numbers, and it's called it's like the desk clock. It's just countdowning. But it was killed right after we got the earthquake, 3/11. And then, the one with the power plant got devastated, so we have to save the energy. And then institutions decided to kill the installation. And then, but the night after that project was launched, I mean, people were so excited about because it's so new, and then people go there and take a photo. But maybe like 2 years later, I mean, it just becomes natural, and then people don't really realize like, oh, there's a big numbers. But when we cut off, actually people start realizing how important, or how important as an icon of the city. And it's like the feeling like my iPhone is stilled. So I know what to do with that iPhone, but it's better to have a white iPhone. So we're gonna have a final torch actually coming March to celebrate the death of the interactive media art.
Any questions, comments from the audience? Oh, one there.
You've all individually spoken about kind of you need volunteers in like the research kind of stages. How do you become a volunteer? It's like on your website.
Are you just offering to be there?
Yeah, and I'm just wondering. Yeah, I'm wondering how is it on the website, or how do you go about advertising it?
When we need people to help, then we'll generally advertise it on our website, or we'll get something out in the press for that particular one. So, for example, with the Sunderland piece that we did, it was in the local press and on the BBC in Sunderland for people to come down. And it's amazing what the response often is. You end up with hundreds of people queuing up to be involved in something, which is great. Wow. It's good fun.
Olamide, how do you kind of recruit new young urbanists to the Future Lagos cause?
So actually, so as we described in like Bristol, you have a good community or a great community of like people that have great ideas and creatives and architects, and you kind of all know each other. So it's actually, even though we are a huge city, a lot of the people who are within this industry all know each other. So they always have, and you have universities and you have various organizations, so you always have a pool of people to kind of draw from and pull from. So it's not too difficult, even though you have a city of like so many people.
So then how, within that, do you continue to be open and accessible and not become cliquey within these things?
Exactly. It's very, very difficult because we have a discussion that every workshop is the same people that we're seeing, or every activity is the same people that we're seeing. So you do have to really kind of draw out of that. So there's an organization which I'm also part of called We Love Lagos, and we've done that successfully actually through social media and getting young people within the age of like 15 to 25, 30, just kind of rock up into our office, work in our office, just kind of use our platform to kind of tweet from about things happening in Lagos. So I think that's been done very successfully. So you don't just kind of keep it to the same people thinking about ideas, but then you kind of bring in especially young ideas and young kind of minds.
Seiichi, we were kind of like completely bowled over by the number of people that came forward and came out for the things. Do you want to share some of the ideas that came out of the Playable City Tokyo Lab?
Yeah. Maybe this is really familiar with you in UK, but it was not really familiar to Japanese. And so we draw and we flag it and we share all that idea with others. And then there's several amazing ideas and playable traffic lights, but I think I'm going to focus on the communications. There's a phone box in Japan, and then we can make it interactive phone box, collaborator, elevator, but it's like the place to collaborate, or because the people get really quiet inside the elevator.
One of the rules of Playable City appears to be think of a pun and make a project around it. And we were delighted that the people of Tokyo kind of preempted this and got right into it.
Right. So this is my personal favorite is communication. As you see the current situation of Tokyo, there are so many construction going on, and then there's cones to actually make the barriers. And then there's one girl really obsessed about the corn, and then she wants to actually make it playable. So what if all the guards start swinging, some of the light bars and.
We don't have those here. You might have to explain that.
Okay. Okay. There is light bars, so they can guide where the car goes. And then what if he's a Harry Potter type of thing. Like he swing it, and entire corn start rights up and the different patterns and things like that. So it's actually really playable that there's an existing corn everywhere, and it's so cheap. And then but if we put some technology inside, it becomes playable. So it was really fun. So
we're gonna make this one for March, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So the Clare came over, there's a flag, and, it was a really nice session. It's maybe in total 80 people participate from different background, students, Honda people, agency people. It was really fun. Yeah, hopefully Lego's going to have a really cool one.
We've got time for one last question.
My question actually relates to communication, and in particular feedback. So I can imagine that through the creative process, you're getting a ton of feedback from people that are involved in the process, creatives that are involved, fans, supporters, everybody. I imagine you get a lot of really great ideas out of that feedback. But in your creative process, how have you been able to kind of take in those ideas, maybe put them back to the side if they don't relate to your current vision, on the other hand, take new ideas and kind of bridge that into what your current goal is for the project?
Okay, if all three of you could answer briefly. Thank you.
Well, for me, we're in the process of debating, but I think for me the good project is bringing the good feedback and also the bad feedback, and then people start talking about debating it. So the Playable City, I think same thing is going to happen, but we're not really ignoring the bad feedback. I mean, we try to suck it up, and then we try to communicate to make it better.
I think we, as a studio, we're really interested in all sorts of feedback from during the process, but also afterwards, and it just kind of informs the next project really, and what you're doing. So, if it's not engaging people properly, then why not? And can we adapt and can we change it? Sometimes that means that because when a project is live, it's not actually finished. We can still tweak it and adjust it, and often we will then do that to try and make it better, or we save it for the next project. We've got a big bin of kind of ideas which we like to kind of rummage through regularly.
I think that's a great question because with the team in terms of Playable City and British Council and Lego and Future Legos, we've been discussing this a lot in terms of the longevity of the project and also where does the project go next. And once we're done, great, we're done. But then who can take this on and who can make the project bigger, smaller, change it, move it to a different location? So it's actually such a great question because with all the feedback and information and ideas, it's not really necessarily just left to us what to do with it. It's also to make sure that other people can kind of carry on and take it on board as an idea or as a concept and also create something out of those various ideas or feedback or bad, good. Yeah. So.
It's Mark Lever, who's at the front here, who works with us on Playable City International, just came back from the Smart City Expo in Barcelona, and I said, how was it? And he said, it was great, but it was kind of missing people. And I think that that feedback and the sense of, I think what we're all trying to do here is to make that partnership with people so that we're not just spamming them with play, but we're inviting them to collaborate with us on what a city might look like. So this is the end of this session. So please join me in thanking the speakers.